The beginning of a simple act of kindness. Timmy was a curious 12-year-old with a heart full of wonder. His life wasn't anything extravagant, no luxurious vacations or flashy gadgets, but it was rich with love, warmth, and the steady comfort of family. Timmy and his mother, Karen, had a special bond that could be seen in every conversation, every shared glance, every quiet moment spent together. It wasn't always easy. Karen worked long hours at the local hospital, managing the stress of a demanding job while still managing to keep their modest home in order. But no matter what, they always had each other. And for Timmy, that was more than enough. Every Saturday afternoon, when the week's hustle and bustle gave way to a slower rhythm, Timmy and Karen would head to their favorite local cafe, the Corner Brew. It was a tiny spot tucked away on the corner of Oak Street, its exterior nothing particularly special, an old brick building with faded paint and mismatched signs that advertised everything from fresh pastries to hand-brewed coffee. But to Timmy and his mom, it was a haven. The moment they entered, the world outside seemed to vanish. The smell of freshly ground coffee, the soft clink of cups, and the low murmur of conversations filled the air, all blending together into a symphony of comfort. Today was no different. As the door chimed softly behind them, Timmy took in the familiar sight of the cafe. The worn wooden floors, the mismatched chairs and tables, and the front windows that let in the warm light of the sun, filling the space with golden warmth. It was a small but cozy world, and it was their world. Timmy's eyes sparkled as he glanced at his mom. "Can we sit by the window, Mom?" he asked, his voice light with excitement. Karen, who had been a little more tired than usual from the demands of her job, gave him a soft smile. She could see the brightness in her son's eyes, and it always filled her heart with joy. "Of course, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm and filled with affection. They weaved their way through the bustling cafe, Timmy's small steps quick and eager as he navigated the maze of tables and chairs. The place was a local favorite, so it wasn't uncommon to see the same people week after week, chatting away with friends or reading quietly in their favorite nook. Today, there was a gentle hum of conversation as the cafe patrons settled in, enjoying their morning brews. As they made their way to their usual corner by the large front windows, Timmy couldn't help but notice how the sunlight poured through the glass, casting a golden glow across the wooden floorboards. It was as though the cafe was alive with warmth, wrapping them in a gentle embrace. They slid into the booth near the window, a little nook with a perfect view of the street outside. Timmy always loved this spot. He could watch the world go by, the small-town streets lined with trees, the people walking their dogs, the occasional car passing by. It felt like a moment of peace amidst the chaos of everyday life. Karen seemed to feel the same way. Her shoulders, which had been tense from the weight of a long work week, relaxed as soon as she sat down. Timmy could see the stress melt away from her face, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed far off. Timmy reached across the table and took his mother's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I'm so glad we came here today, Mom," he said, his voice soft and sincere. Karen smiled warmly, her heart swelling with affection. She looked at Timmy, this incredible little boy who had always made her proud. "Me too, honey. This place always makes everything feel better, doesn't it?" she replied, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she returned the squeeze to his hand. It was a quiet, simple moment, but it meant everything to them. Before they could sink fully into their peaceful moment, a familiar voice interrupted. "Well, if it isn't my favorite mother-son duo," came the voice of Betty, the cafe's longtime waitress. Betty was a staple at the Corner Brew, an older woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor who had known Timmy since he was a toddler. She was like a second grandmother to him, always greeting them with a smile and a kind word. Betty approached their table with her usual warm smile, a pad of paper in hand, ready to take their order. "What can I get for you two today?" she asked. Timmy, never one to shy away from his love of hot chocolate, grinned up at her. "Hi, Miss Betty. Can I have a hot chocolate, please? With extra whipped cream, if that's okay." His excitement was contagious, and Betty chuckled softly, her eyes sparkling. "You got it, young man," she said with a wink. Turning to Karen, she added, "And for you, Karen, the usual." Karen, who had been looking out the window with a contented sigh, looked up and smiled. "Yes, please. Just a regular coffee today, Betty. Thank you." Betty nodded, taking note of their orders before turning to head to the counter. Timmy and Karen shared a brief, content look before their conversation drifted back to the simplicity of their lives, the small joys of daily life that so often went unnoticed. As they chatted, Timmy couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. His mom worked so hard, and though they didn't have much in terms of material wealth, they had something far more precious, each other. He knew his mother loved him more than anything, and he loved her just as deeply. He realized that moments like these, moments where they could simply enjoy each other's company, away from the stress of the outside world, were rare and precious. The cafe was alive with its usual rhythm. The soft clinking of cups, the low hum of voices, and the occasional burst of laughter filled the air. But in the corner by the window, it felt as though time slowed down. In that moment, it was just Timmy and Karen, and the world outside seemed far away. Betty soon returned with their drinks, her movements as familiar as the morning sunshine. She set down a steaming cup of hot chocolate for Timmy, topped with a mountain of whipped cream, and placed Karen's coffee in front of her with a gentle smile. "Here you go, my dears," Betty said, her voice warm and maternal. "Anything else I can get for you?" Timmy's face lit up as he picked up his hot chocolate, carefully scooping a little of the whipped cream with his spoon. "No, this is perfect. Thank you, Miss Betty," he said, his voice full of youthful enthusiasm. "Of course, sweetheart," Betty replied, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "You two enjoy your drinks. I'll check back in a little while." As Betty moved away, Timmy and Karen settled back into their usual rhythm. They chatted about everything and nothing. Timmy's school, Karen's work, and the little things that made up their everyday life. But neither of them knew that this seemingly ordinary day was about to take a turn that would change everything. Timmy, with his innocent belief in kindness and justice, had no idea that his small act of standing up for his mom just yesterday would soon lead to a momentous shift in their lives. And Karen, the strong, loving woman who had always put Timmy first, was unaware that the stranger sitting across the room, the one who had witnessed the confrontation, was about to change their world forever. The unexpected turn. The afternoon sun began its slow descent, casting a warm amber glow across the streets outside the cafe window. Inside, the soft murmur of conversations created a cozy background, blending with the gentle clinking of cups and the occasional laughter. For Karen and Timmy, it was a moment of peace amidst the chaos of life. But even in this quiet corner of their world, something was shifting, a quiet, unseen current that would soon pull them into a completely unexpected direction. As Timmy and Karen sipped their drinks, their conversation drifted from lighthearted musings to more personal topics. Karen, though exhausted from her long hours at the hospital, seemed to find solace in these moments with her son. It was a relief, in a way, to be able to talk without the weight of responsibilities hanging over her. Timmy, being the thoughtful young boy he was, had a way of lifting her spirits with his genuine curiosity and kindness. "Mom, do you think I'll ever be able to do something important when I grow up?" Timmy asked, his voice full of earnestness as he looked at her with those wide, trusting eyes. Karen blinked, surprised by the question. It wasn't unusual for Timmy to ask questions about the future, but this one felt different. There was a depth to it that made her pause. She set down her coffee and took a moment to consider her answer. "Well, honey, I think you already do important things every day," she said softly, her voice steady. "Even the small acts of kindness, like helping someone or standing up for them when they need it, that's important." Sometimes, the things that matter most aren't the big, grand gestures, but the little moments that show who we are. Timmy smiled, though his brow furrowed slightly as he pondered her words. He took another sip of his hot chocolate, his mind clearly processing her response. Just as Karen was about to offer another comforting word, the bell above the cafe door chimed again. This time, however, the sound was different, sharp, abrupt. The cheerful murmur of the cafe's ambience seemed to shift slightly, a faint tension in the air as a man entered. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a weathered leather jacket that had clearly seen better days. His hair was dark, thick, and unkempt, a stark contrast to the neat and cozy interior of the cafe. He walked in with the kind of purposeful stride that made heads turn, his gaze scanning the room. Timmy noticed him immediately, though it was only for a fleeting moment. His attention quickly returned to his mother, but something about the man felt off. The man moved toward the counter, his heavy boots clicking against the floor with each step. He ordered his drink in a gruff voice that echoed in the otherwise peaceful cafe. The moment was brief, but the uneasy feeling remained in the air, almost like a storm on the horizon. As Timmy and Karen continued their conversation, neither of them noticed the small interaction unfolding across the room. A young woman, carrying a heavy belly and a look of quiet strength, had just entered the cafe. She was dressed in a simple yet elegant manner. Her clothes were tailored with an understated grace that seemed to reflect her calm demeanor. Her dark skin glowed in the soft light, and her smile, though gentle, exuded a quiet confidence. She had the kind of presence that seemed to fill the space around her without demanding attention, but it was clear that she was a woman of substance. Karen noticed her first. She gave the woman a brief, polite nod as she passed by, recognizing her from the many visits she had made to the cafe in the past. The woman, whose name was Karen too, though Timmy always called her Miss Karen to avoid confusion, was a regular at the cafe, often enjoying a quiet cup of tea or coffee while reading a book or working on her laptop. She was well liked by the other patrons, though no one really knew her beyond the surface. But as Miss Karen approached the counter, something strange happened. The man in the leather jacket, who had been sitting at a table near the front window, quietly drinking his coffee, noticed her too. His eyes narrowed for a moment, his lips curling into an expression that was hard to place. For a brief second, it seemed as though he was about to stand up and approach her. Timmy, who had been watching this interaction with a mixture of curiosity and unease, felt his stomach tighten. He didn't know what was going on, but he could sense that something was about to happen. And then it did. The man stood up abruptly and walked toward Miss Karen. He didn't approach her in a friendly manner. No, it was more like an ambush. His steps were sharp, his body language tense. As he got closer to Miss Karen, he made a rude comment. Timmy couldn't make out the exact words, but the tone was clear, angry, dismissive, and laced with something that made Timmy's blood boil. Karen was caught off guard. She hadn't seen the man's approach, nor had she expected to be spoken to in such a rude, degrading way. But what made the situation even worse was the man's next move. He pointed to her rounded belly and scoffed loudly. "What, you think you're special? Pregnant and walking around like you own the place?" He sneered, his words dripping with disdain. The entire cafe fell into a heavy silence, as though the air itself had thickened. It was a moment of palpable discomfort. Miss Karen, to her credit, didn't flinch. Her face remained calm, though her eyes held a quiet intensity. She had dealt with harassment before, but this time, it was different. This time, it wasn't just about her. It was about her child, the little one growing inside of her. She could feel the weight of the insult, and though she was used to brushing things off, something about this man's words struck a nerve. Timmy's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the exchange unfold. He knew that feeling. The same sense of helplessness and frustration he had experienced when he'd witnessed bullying at school, when someone had been picked on or belittled, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But this time, Timmy wasn't going to stand by. His hand trembled slightly as he pushed away from the table, his eyes locked on the scene unfolding in front of him. Without thinking, he stood up and walked toward the man. The cafe fell silent, the tension thickening with every step Timmy took. His voice, though young, rang out clear and steady. "Hey, stop that. You don't get to talk to her like that," Timmy called out, his words filled with the courage of a child who didn't understand fear in the face of injustice. The man turned slowly, his eyes narrowing in disbelief at the young boy who had dared challenge him. For a moment, he seemed to hesitate, unsure of how to react. Timmy didn't back down. "She's pregnant, and you're being rude. You should apologize," he said, his voice unwavering. A smile, cold and predatory, spread across the man's face as he took a step closer to Timmy. "And what are you going to do about it, kid?" he growled, his tone dripping with malice. But before he could say anything further, Karen's voice rang out from behind Timmy, strong and steady. "You heard the boy," she said firmly. "You don't get to talk to me, or anyone else, like that." The man, realizing he had pushed too far, muttered an inaudible curse under his breath and walked away, muttering something about needing to mind his own business. But the damage had already been done. Timmy stood there, heart racing, but a sense of satisfaction rising in him as he watched the man retreat. For a moment, he felt like he had done something that mattered, like he had stood up for what was right, just like his mom had always taught him to do. The ripple effect. The aftermath of Timmy's bold stand hung in the air like a charged current, filling the cafe with a strange mixture of tension and relief. The man in the leather jacket had retreated, muttering under his breath, but the reverberations of his encounter with Timmy and Karen remained. Karen's heart was still racing, but not for the reasons she expected. It wasn't fear that had caused her pulse to quicken, it was pride, a swelling of admiration for her son's bravery. She had raised him to understand the value of kindness, empathy, and standing up for what was right, but seeing him put those lessons into action in such a moment was something entirely different. Timmy's small act of defiance, the courage to speak up against injustice, had left her speechless. As she watched the man leave the cafe, the weight of the encounter slowly lifted. Miss Karen, who had been the target of the man's harsh words, exhaled softly. Though she hadn't shown it outwardly, Karen could sense the relief in the other woman's posture as the confrontation ended. Miss Karen gave Timmy a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice gentle but sincere. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Timmy flushed under her gaze, shrugging awkwardly. "It was nothing. You shouldn't have to put up with that kind of stuff." His voice was full of sincerity, yet there was an air of innocence in it. To him, standing up for someone who was being hurt was just the right thing to do. It wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about doing what felt true to his heart. But for Karen, this moment would linger far longer than it seemed. She glanced at Timmy, a quiet pride swelling in her chest as she realized how deeply her son had internalized the values she'd worked so hard to instill in him. Even at 12, Timmy showed an innate ability to see past fear and prejudice, something she herself had sometimes struggled with as an adult. Her heart warmed as she thought of how strong and resilient he was becoming and how, in so many ways, he was already making a difference in the world. Betty, who had been quietly observing the exchange from a distance, now returned to the table with a soft, knowing smile. "Well, I'll be. Looks like your son's got more than just a sweet tooth," she said, her voice laced with admiration as she set down the check. Karen laughed softly, the tension from the earlier encounter melting away as she glanced at Timmy. "I'm proud of him," she said quietly, her voice tinged with emotion. "He's got a good heart." Timmy, who had been quietly sipping his hot chocolate and feeling slightly embarrassed by the attention, looked up at Betty with a shy smile. "I just don't like when people are mean to others," he said, his words simple but filled with meaning. "Sounds like you've got a good head on your shoulders," Betty replied, her eyes warm. "A good heart, too. People like you are the ones who make this world a little bit brighter, Timmy." The words stuck with him as the conversation continued, but in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but wonder about the man. He was still a bit shaken by the encounter, by how someone could be so cruel without any apparent reason. It didn't make sense to him. He had always believed that kindness could bridge gaps between people, but the man in the cafe had been a reminder that not everyone shared that belief. What had truly stood out to him, though, wasn't the anger or the hostility. It was the way Miss Karen had handled herself in the face of it. She had been calm, composed, and dignified, even when the man's words were cutting and harsh. She had shown Timmy, once again, the power of grace under pressure. As the afternoon wore on, Karen and Timmy lingered at the cafe, sipping their drinks and talking, but there was an undercurrent of quiet reflection between them. Timmy found himself thinking about how the world could be better, how small acts of kindness, like standing up for someone in need, could ripple out and change lives in ways they couldn't always predict. And then, just as they were preparing to leave, the door to the cafe chimed once again. This time, a soft gasp from the woman behind the counter caught their attention. Miss Karen was back, but there was something different in her expression now. Her posture was still confident, but there was an unmistakable shift in the way she carried herself. As she approached the counter, she exchanged a brief conversation with Betty, who nodded knowingly before turning back to Timmy and Karen. Betty's eyes held a quiet glint of something, anticipation, perhaps. Timmy's curiosity piqued. He looked at Karen with a questioning glance, but she only smiled and gave him a small nod as if to say, "Wait and see." Miss Karen walked over to their table, her steps measured but purposeful. She stopped before Timmy and Karen, her face soft with a quiet smile that seemed to hold something more than just politeness. "I wanted to thank you, Timmy," Miss Karen said, her voice steady and warm, "for standing up for me today. That took a lot of courage, and I'm grateful to you for it." Timmy, who hadn't expected the attention, blushed and looked down at his shoes. "I just did what anyone should do," he mumbled, though there was a light in his eyes that couldn't be dimmed. "You shouldn't have to deal with people being mean." Miss Karen studied him for a moment, as though considering something carefully. Her eyes softened as she nodded, taking in Timmy's words. Then, without warning, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, holding it out to Timmy. Timmy blinked in surprise. "What's this?" he asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "It's a small token of my appreciation," Miss Karen explained, her tone thoughtful. "A way to say thank you for your kindness." Karen, sitting across from Timmy, watched the exchange with interest. She hadn't expected this turn of events, but there was something about Miss Karen that made her feel that it was more than just a gesture. It was something meaningful. Timmy hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should accept such a gift, but his mother's gentle nod of encouragement urged him forward. He reached out and took the envelope from Miss Karen, his fingers brushing the smooth paper. "Thank you," Timmy said softly, though his heart was pounding in his chest. Miss Karen smiled, her expression warm. "You're very welcome, and remember, kindness matters. The world is full of people who need a little light, and sometimes you're the one who gets to shine it on them." As Timmy held the envelope in his hands, something inside him shifted. He hadn't expected anything from his small act of kindness. Not praise, not attention, certainly not a gift. But here he was, holding something that, at first glance, seemed like a simple thank you. But to Timmy, it felt like a seed planted, one that could grow into something far more important than he could ever imagine. The unveiling gifting that something momentous was unfolding around him. He held the envelope in his hands, the smooth paper cool against his skin, and though he had no idea what lay inside, he felt a stirring in his chest, a sense of anticipation, as if the world itself were holding its breath, waiting for him to make the next move. "Are you going to open it?" Karen asked, her voice gentle but filled with curiosity. She leaned forward, her expression reflecting the same intrigue Timmy felt but couldn't yet articulate. Timmy blinked, as if brought back to the present moment. and then nodded slowly. He hadn't expected this kind of attention, but there was no denying the gentle pull of Miss Karen's kindness. She had made it clear that she wanted him to have the envelope, but what was inside? His fingers traced the edge of the envelope carefully, and then, with a small breath, he opened it. Inside was a neatly folded note, but more importantly, there was a thick card, a piece of paper that felt unusually heavy in his hands. He unfolded the card, the weight of it immediately drawing his attention. The note inside was short, but each word seemed to carry with it a depth that made Timmy pause. He read it aloud, his voice soft but clear. Dear Timmy, in a world that sometimes feels lost in its own darkness, people like you remind us that light still exists. I am grateful for your courage today, and I want to show you that kindness doesn't go unnoticed. Please accept this as a small token, but one I hope will make a difference in your life, as you have made in mine. With all my thanks, Karen Williams. Timmy read the note again, absorbing each word. The words, though simple, carried a warmth that seemed to fill the cafe. He looked up at Miss Karen, his mouth slightly agape, unsure of what to say. Miss Karen's smile deepened, her expression knowing. There's more, she said softly, nodding toward the thick card Timmy had unfolded. I hope it can help you see that sometimes kindness can open doors we never expected. Timmy felt a flutter of confusion in his chest. What could she possibly mean? The card seemed just like any other card, businesslike, with an understated elegance. The front was simple, the gold-embossed logo with no real indication of what it might be. Taking a deep breath, he turned the card over, his heart racing as he saw a number written on it, along with a name. Karen Williams, CEO of Williams Enterprises. His mind froze. He had seen that name before, though he couldn't quite place it. Williams Enterprises, a company, but of what kind? Timmy's thoughts began to race, a rush of memories coming back to him in flashes. News stories, images of powerful business leaders, and stories his mom had told him about people who made huge impacts in the world. But he couldn't quite put it together, until he glanced back at Miss Karen, who was watching him carefully, a hint of amusement in her eyes. Wait, Timmy said slowly, realization dawning in his voice. Are you the Karen Williams? Miss Karen nodded, her smile growing even warmer. I suppose you could say that. I'm the founder and CEO of Williams Enterprises, a company that focuses on philanthropic work, helping people, particularly those who are working hard but struggling to make ends meet. Timmy's eyes widened in shock. He glanced back at the card, his mind trying to comprehend what this meant. This wasn't just any ordinary woman. She was a powerful businesswoman, someone whose name carried weight, whose work had touched countless lives. And now she was standing in front of him, offering him a gift that he had no way of understanding. At least not yet. Miss Karen seemed to sense his confusion and took a step forward, her voice kind and patient. Timmy, I know this may come as a surprise. You probably never imagined that standing up for someone in a cafe would lead to this, but sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways. What you did today reminded me of the importance of staying true to what we believe, no matter the circumstances. And for that, I want to show you just how powerful your kindness can be. Karen's eyes flickered with something deeper now, something that seemed to transcend the role she had as a CEO. It was something personal, something that suggested she, too, had once stood in Timmy's shoes. At a crossroads, unsure of where life might take her, but trusting that her actions could make a difference. Do you remember what I said about the gift? She asked softly. That kindness matters. Well, I want to help you see that you can make a bigger impact than you realize. You may be young now, but your heart is already more powerful than you know. Timmy looked at her, trying to wrap his head around what she was saying. Was she offering him something more than just money or fame? The idea of a gift seemed to grow beyond the physical realm, becoming something more abstract and meaningful, an opportunity, perhaps, or an invitation into a world of influence and change. I want you to come work with me, Timmy, Miss Karen said, her voice quiet but filled with a weight that made his heart skip a beat. I've been looking for a young person with a fresh perspective, someone who can see the world not just for what it is but for what it could be, someone who's unafraid to challenge the norms and push forward, even when it seems difficult. Someone like you. Timmy's mind reeled. Work with her. A CEO. This was all too much to take in, but he could feel a deep pull in his chest. Miss Karen wasn't offering him a simple job. She was offering him a chance to shape his future, a future filled with potential that stretched far beyond what he had ever imagined. I don't know what to say, Timmy stammered, his voice a little shaky. The thought of working with someone like Miss Karen was both exciting and overwhelming. He was just a boy. How could he possibly help her with anything? You don't have to say anything right now, Miss Karen replied with a soft laugh. But think about it. The opportunity is there, Timmy. You have something special inside of you, and I want to help you develop it, to help you realize just how much power your actions can have on the world around you. Timmy sat in stunned silence, his mind still racing, trying to process the words he had just spoken. His whole life, he had been taught that people should treat others with kindness. But this was a whole new level of kindness, an offer to be part of something bigger than himself, an opportunity to learn and grow alongside someone who had dedicated her life to making the world a better place. Karen sat back in her chair, watching him thoughtfully. I know it's a lot to take in, but no matter what you decide, Timmy, know that you've already made a difference. You showed me today what true courage looks like, and that's something I'll never forget. Timmy nodded slowly, though his mind was still spinning. He had never imagined his simple act of standing up for someone in a cafe would lead him here, to a moment that could change the entire course of his life. As the hours passed and they made their way back home, Timmy's thoughts remained with him. What would the future hold? How far could kindness really take him? One thing was for sure. He was no longer just a boy. He was someone who had already started changing the world, whether he knew it or not. The journey begins. The days following the unexpected encounter at the cafe felt like they were unfolding in slow motion for Timmy. The envelope with the golden logo embossed on the outside sat in his room like an artifact from a world he wasn't yet sure he belonged to. He hadn't opened the card again. He didn't need to. Its weight was still fresh in his mind, both literal and metaphorical. He couldn't shake the words Miss Karen had spoken to him. You have something special inside of you. Those words echoed in his thoughts, lingering like a quiet whisper in the back of his mind. Timmy had always believed he was just an ordinary kid, a boy who liked to help others when he could, who enjoyed making people laugh, and who loved learning about the world. But now, it seemed like someone was offering him an opportunity to do more than just watch the world. Someone was offering him a chance to help shape it. At first, Timmy wasn't sure what to make of it. Miss Karen had given him a gift, yes, but it wasn't the kind of gift you could just wrap up and put on a shelf. It wasn't something that would fit neatly into his life as he knew it. It was a challenge, a test of sorts. He spent the next few days in quiet contemplation. He didn't talk about the card to anyone, not even to Karen. The idea of working with Miss Karen seemed both thrilling and daunting. He wasn't sure if he was ready for such a big step, but every time he thought about it, he couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement, like something just out of his reach that was calling him forward. On a Saturday morning, Timmy's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his mother's voice from downstairs. "Timmy, there's someone here to see you." Timmy's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't expecting anyone, especially not on a Saturday. He hesitated for a moment before walking downstairs, his mind racing with possibilities. What could this be? Had Miss Karen come to talk to him about her offer? Or was it something else? As he reached the bottom of the stairs, he saw a familiar face sitting at the kitchen table. Miss Karen was there, her calm demeanor filling the room with an air of importance. She looked up as Timmy entered, and her smile was warm, though there was a certain seriousness in her eyes. "Good morning, Timmy," she said softly. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Timmy stood frozen for a moment. No, not at all, he stammered, still a little in shock. What are you doing here? Karen looked at him thoughtfully, as if weighing her words before speaking. I wanted to talk to you about the opportunity I mentioned. But more importantly, I wanted to get a sense of what you think. I know it's a big decision, and I didn't want to rush you. Timmy glanced over at Karen, who was watching them with a curious, yet proud, look. She had been quiet since Miss Karen had arrived, but Timmy could sense that his mother was just as interested in hearing what Miss Karen had to say. Timmy nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the conversation ahead. I've been thinking about it a lot, he admitted. It's just, all of this is so overwhelming. I mean, you're a CEO. You've done so much. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Miss Karen's expression softened as she stood up and walked over to Timmy. I understand. And that's exactly why I'm here. I'm not asking you to jump into anything without fully understanding what you'd be stepping into. But I believe in you, Timmy. I believe in your heart, and I believe that you could bring something unique to the work we're doing. Her words were gentle, but there was an undeniable force behind them. Timmy could see the passion in her eyes. Passion for what she did, for the mission she had created. She wasn't just a businesswoman. She was someone who believed in the power of change, in the ability of individuals to make a difference in the world. We focus on helping people who need it most, Miss Karen continued, her voice steady and sincere. But we also believe that the change we create has to come from a place of authenticity. That's where you come in, Timmy. You have a perspective that's different from anyone else. You've already shown that by standing up for a complete stranger. And that's the kind of leadership we need. Timmy felt a flush of pride at her words, but it was accompanied by a deep sense of uncertainty. But I'm just a kid, he said quietly. I don't know what I could possibly bring to the table. Miss Karen chuckled softly, her laugh light and reassuring. And that's exactly why I want you on board. Because you are a kid. Because you still have the ability to see the world with fresh eyes. You don't have the cynicism that so many adults have. And that is a powerful thing. Timmy took a deep breath, trying to wrap his head around everything she was saying. He had always been taught to believe in the power of kindness, but he had never imagined it could lead to an opportunity like this, an opportunity to make a real lasting impact. We'll start small, Miss Karen continued, sensing his hesitation. You don't have to jump in and change the world tomorrow. But I'd like you to come with me to a community project next week. It's a program we're starting to help underprivileged kids in the area get the resources they need to succeed in school. You can see firsthand what we do, and maybe you'll come away with some ideas of your own. The offer was tempting. Timmy thought of the kids in his school, the ones who struggled with basic needs like food and school supplies. He thought of how much he wished he could do for them. This, in a way, felt like his chance to make a real difference. I think I'd like that, Timmy said, his voice growing more confident. I don't know how much I can help, but I'd love to see what you do. Miss Karen smiled, her eyes glowing with pride. I knew you'd say that. I'm excited, Timmy. You'll see. It's not just about giving money or resources. It's about understanding the people we're helping and connecting with them. That's the heart of everything we do. Timmy felt a renewed sense of excitement bubble within him. For the first time, he could see the path forward, one that wasn't just about being a good person but about actively creating change. He could feel that the journey he was about to embark on was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. As the conversation continued, they made plans for the upcoming week, and by the end of it, Timmy felt a sense of anticipation that he had never experienced before. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was part of something that mattered. That night, as he lay in bed, the weight of it all still hadn't quite sunk in. He wasn't sure exactly what the future held, but one thing was certain: he wasn't the same person he had been before the cafe incident. Something inside him had shifted. He wasn't waiting for life to happen to him anymore. He was ready to make it happen. And with that thought, Timmy fell into a peaceful sleep, the excitement of the future ahead guiding him through the night. A new chapter. The morning sun peered through Timmy's window, casting golden streaks of light across his bedroom floor. It was the start of a new day, one that carried the weight of new beginnings. Timmy had woken up earlier than usual, his thoughts already racing ahead to the events of the day. He couldn't shake the excitement that had been brewing inside him since Miss Karen's visit. Today was the day he would accompany her to one of the community projects she had mentioned, the very thing that had sparked his interest in her world of philanthropy. As he pulled on his shoes and grabbed his backpack, Timmy's heart beat with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. He had no idea what to expect, but something told him that his life was about to change forever. "Timmy," Karen's voice called from downstairs. "Are you ready?" "Coming, Mom," he called back, rushing to grab his jacket. He could already hear Karen's soft laughter echoing up the stairs. She was supportive, as always, but she also knew that Timmy was stepping into uncharted territory. When Timmy made his way downstairs, he found his mother sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, a smile playing on her lips. Timmy could see the proud glint in her eyes as she looked at him, though she didn't say a word. She knew that her son was embarking on something extraordinary, and she had no doubt that he would rise to the occasion. As they got into the car, Timmy's mind wandered to the possibility of what could lie ahead. He wasn't sure what he expected from the community project, but something inside him told him it was the beginning of something that would reshape his understanding of the world and of himself. When they arrived at the site, Timmy could see the transformation in action. What had once been an abandoned building was now alive with energy. People were gathered, children were playing, and volunteers were working together to set up tables, bookshelves, and supplies. It was clear that this place wasn't just a community center. It was a safe haven for those in need, a place where hope and opportunity were being cultivated. Timmy's eyes widened as he stepped out of the car. It was bigger than he had imagined, and the energy was palpable. Everywhere he looked, people were coming together to create something bigger than themselves. There were parents, teachers, and young adults who had volunteered their time to help those less fortunate. Some were organizing events for the children, others were setting up food and clothing donations, while still others worked on providing the kind of educational support that many kids in the community lacked. Miss Karen led him inside, showing him around the center. It was filled with vibrant murals on the walls, paintings of children, families, and various symbols of unity. "This is the heart of our work," Miss Karen explained, her voice filled with pride. "We create spaces like this all over the country, places where people can come together to help each other grow. We focus on education, emotional support, and resources that people might not have access to otherwise." Timmy's mind was reeling. He had never seen anything like this before. The sheer scale of the operation was enough to leave him in awe, but it wasn't just the physical space that struck him. It was the atmosphere of hope and resilience that filled every corner of the center. As they walked through the space, Timmy noticed the small details, the bookshelves filled with donated books, the brightly colored educational posters on the walls, and the volunteers helping kids with their homework. It was a place of possibilities, a place where people could not only find support, but also start to believe in their own potential. At one table, a volunteer was sitting with a young boy who was struggling with his reading. Timmy watched as the volunteer patiently guided him through the words, encouraging him when he stumbled, and celebrating each small victory. Timmy felt his chest tighten with emotion. This was what it was all about. Real people, working together to make the world a little bit better, one small step at a time. "Do you see it?" Miss Karen asked, her voice quiet as she observed Timmy's reaction. "This is the kind of work we do every day. We empower people to help themselves, to become stronger, more independent, and more connected with one another. It's not just about charity, it's about creating lasting change. When we invest in people, we invest in the future." Timmy nodded, his heart swelling with admiration. He had known about the importance of giving back, But seeing it in action was something entirely different. He felt as though his entire worldview had shifted. Helping wasn't just about doing something kind for someone else. It was about empowering others to find their own strength, to give them the tools they needed to change their own lives. After a while, Miss Karen led Timmy into a back office where a group of community leaders had gathered. They were planning the next phase of their project, an initiative to support local schools by providing school supplies, mentorship, and tutoring for underprivileged students. As the adults discussed the details, Timmy sat quietly in the corner, absorbing the conversation. He could feel the intensity of the work they were doing, but he also sensed something deeper, something that Timmy was beginning to understand more fully. The work they did wasn't about being heroes or getting recognition. It was about the quiet power of change, of lifting people up, and of being a steady presence in someone's life when they needed it most. At the end of the meeting, Miss Karen turned to Timmy. "What do you think, Timmy? Do you see yourself being part of this?" Timmy thought for a long moment, feeling the weight of the question. He looked around the room, at the faces of the people who had committed their lives to this work, and he knew, in that moment, that he had found his purpose. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he knew that this was where he belonged. The passion, the drive, and the sense of community that filled the space spoke to him on a deeper level than he could express. "I want to help," he said, his voice steady. "I want to be a part of this. I want to make a difference." Miss Karen smiled, her eyes twinkling with pride. "I knew you would." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of introductions and new experiences. Timmy spent time talking with the volunteers, getting to know the families who used the center, and even helping to organize a community event later in the day. He realized that helping wasn't just about handing someone a handout. It was about listening, learning, and being there when it mattered most. As the day came to an end, Timmy found himself standing outside the community center, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink as the sun began to set. Miss Karen was standing beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You've made a big decision today, Timmy," she said quietly. "But I believe it's just the beginning for you. This world is full of people who need help, who need guidance, and who need someone to believe in them. You have the potential to be that person for others." Timmy looked out at the horizon, feeling a sense of calm settle over him. He wasn't sure where this journey would take him, but one thing was for sure: it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. He turned to Miss Karen, his voice filled with determination. "I'm ready." And with that, Timmy stepped into his future, one filled with purpose, possibility, and a deep commitment to making the world a better place for those who needed it most.